The majority of care home workers have already taken up the vaccine, and it's essential that all care home workers who can have the vaccine do so in order to protect those in their care.
Can I just say to the Minister, coming back to this point about the impact assessment, in the document prepared for the House, it says a full impact assessment has been prepared. Now, ministers need to give accurate information to the House. If that is not correct, and it's misleading, it should be corrected immediately. And it's not good enough to say something's going to be coming along afterwards. We're going to be asked to vote on this today. There is no urgency here. These regulations do not come into force for 16 weeks until November. So it's perfectly reasonable for them to be taken away, for that impact assessment which has been prepared to be published. If there's uncertainty, share the uncertainty with the House. It isn't good enough to expect us to vote on something that is difficult and controversial and complicated and not share the information with the House that the Minister has at her disposal. It is an abuse. It's not good enough.
There are serious warnings from the care sector that the government's plan could lead to staff shortages in already understaffed care homes. This would have disastrous consequences on the quality of care. A failure of leadership here will place the care sector in an even more precarious situation than it currently is, with even fewer staff than at present. There are serious warnings from the care sector that the government's plan could lead to staff shortages in already understaffed care homes, and this would have disastrous consequences on the quality of care. Over 100,000 posts in the care sector are currently unfilled, with recruitment and retention already extremely difficult due to low wage levels for difficult and demanding jobs. Not only would this have a disastrous impact on those relying on care, but the stress and trauma placed on their relatives will affect so many across the country. We already have a social care crisis. Let's not deepen it.
My constituents are absolutely livid about what's being proposed, and I won't quote extensively from a letter I had from Mr Davis from Ferndown, but he says it's completely wrong and unethical and it makes no sense. An NHS consultant in Christchurch says mandatory vaccination would be a crossing the Rubicon on medical choice, medical confidentiality and bodily autonomy, the vital elements of the right to privacy. And the Christchurch care home manager to whom I've spoken has said that this whole proposal undermines the need for parity of esteem between care workers and NHS workers. I think this is, as is said in that report, an unnecessary, a disproportionate and misguided proposal.
Now, I've been a minister, I've been through impact assessments, prepared them, signed them off and presented them to the House, and I'm afraid it's not good enough for something that's got very significant impact on thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, in fact, many thousands of businesses, and is a significant step. This is the first time we will have mandated in law effectively compulsory vaccinations. It's frankly offensive that it's being debated in a 90-minute statutory instrument debate in the House, which I have to say, Mr Deputy Speaker, because the name of the regulations doesn't leap out at you what it is. I think many colleagues were unaware of the fact we were being asked to vote on this today until it was drawn to their attention.
The question we as legislators have to grapple with is whether coercion is the answer, and what might be the unintended consequences of mandating vaccination for some of the lowest paid and most undervalued workers in our society, and a sector that is on its knees. Now, as we've heard, with chronic staff shortages facing the sector, making vaccines mandatory has a real potential to exacerbate these acute shortages. For those who are vaccine hesitant, there is a real concern that they may simply leave the profession rather than get vaccinated, particularly as we know that there are serious shortages in other sectors, such as hospitality, who are offering more competitive pay. Now, with 1.5 million older people not currently getting the care they need, already overstretched staff will become even thinner on the ground. This decision sets a precedent and must not be taken lightly.
This is a very serious innovation, Mr Deputy Speaker, a legal requirement being imposed for people to undertake a medical intervention which may be against their will is a remarkable change in our law. And as the Honourable Lady opposite said, it sets a very serious precedent. And a precedent, it has to be said, which the Minister, I thought slightly alarmingly, raised herself when she said as the winter approaches, COVID and flu will be a problem. As yet, we're not talking about compulsory vaccination for flu, but once we begin down that road, where does it end? But I want to focus in the brief time available to me as Deputy Speaker on a very specific point, which is the importance of respecting religious freedom. Will she commit to including matters of conscience in the exemptions which are provided for in this measure, and a situation where both the residents and the carers might prefer not to have a medical intervention inflicted on them against their will. But a very big principle is at stake.
Well done.
Because I, frankly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, am in despair. You could perhaps have a painting next to me of Munch's The Scream and get towards the feeling that I have over the conduct of government business in this House. The government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is treating this House with utter contempt. 90 minutes on a statutory instrument to fundamentally change the balance of human rights in this country is nothing short of a disgrace. I think it's an insult to care workers in this country that all they merit is 90 minutes on a motion that nobody here seemed to know anything about last week, but which we're discussing this afternoon. I had a lady who called me a week or so ago, and she was in tears on the phone. She has a condition that involves blood clots, and she associated the news about two of the vaccines with her condition. She's a care worker. She was distraught. She now equates her illness, the vaccination, the fact that she can't get a GP appointment to discuss it, but that's a different matter. She now equates that with losing her job. Is that what we're prepared to do to our fellow citizens as a Conservative government? Absolute lunacy. You'd expect this in a communist country, which partly explains why so many of our Eastern European fellow citizens have the scepticism that they do, because they know the nature of the state and how it can be perceived as being malevolent. This instrument is an abomination. It should be withdrawn, and the government should stop treating this House with contempt.